Our next speaker from Chicago, Illinois, Dan Spiegel, is a senior vice president and leader of the Coldwell Banker Commercial network of over 2,500 commercial professionals across the U.S. Dan previously served in a national leadership role at 2 publicly traded commercial real estate firms. Originally from Southern California, Dan has a bachelor's degree in economics from UC Berkeley and a master's in urban planning from the University of Illinois. Dan earned the SIOR designation awarded by the Society of Industrial and Office Realtors. Outside of work, Dan is a volunteer docent for the Chicago Architectural Center and enjoys introducing guests to architectural styles and Chicago history on the well-known River Cruise. Please give a warm welcome to Dan Spiegel.
Thank you, Jason. All right. Is this on? All right, good. Well, good morning, everybody. Happy anniversary. By the way, it's the 8th anniversary of this event, and I've seen this event. I've been here 3 years, and this event has really grown, so congratulations to the local team, Jason and company. You can give us a round of applause, Chris. That's good for you, too. But happy anniversary. You usually say thank you, right? What am I talking about? No one? Wow. It's the 5th anniversary of the COVID pandemic. This week, I know it's a drag, but let me tell you something. Be careful. What did Shakespeare write in the line to Caesar? What did he say? Beware of the Ides of March. What are we in right now? The Ides of March. When did COVID start? The Ides of March. When did Lehman Brothers collapse? The Ides of March. When did that big cargo ship get stuck in the Suez Canal? The Ides of March. Should I go on, or is that enough? Okay. So I think is today the 20th? What is today? Okay. Yeah, so I think we are past the Ides of March. But in any case, I mention all that because COVID was really, for commercial real estate, was a big reset. And it's not, certainly, don't get me wrong, it is nothing like 2008, the Lehman Brothers and all that stuff that came after that. That reset really did 2 things. One is it accelerated a lot of trends in commercial real estate that were already happening, right? So the trends of, hey, I'm going to work from home Friday because my kids have a soccer game, blah, blah, blah. Well, that became, for many people, a full-time gig, right? That impacted commercial real estate. The trend of, I order everything in my life on my phone and it gets delivered to my doorstep, that was a trend that was accelerated. Unfortunately, what's the casualty of that? Yeah, it's Sears, Macy's, what is it, the other one? Not Hobby Lobby, they're still in business. What's the other one? Joann Fabrics and so on. But those were all trends that were already in place. So it is what it is, right? So I do say beware of the Ides of March. They usually say, I think it's October that the stock market has. That's the month they say it's tickets. But let me go through with you. I know this is a symposium on this market, but it's good to understand how it fits into the national landscape in the commercial real estate market. So I'm just going to cover a couple different topics here. Oops, that's me. All right, so hopefully you can see that. This is from Green Street Advisors. Came out in February, and all these mini lines are the trend. They call it the PPI, Property Price Index. It's the trend of pricing for different types of commercial real estate asset. Now, if you look back to 22, that was a high watermark in pricing that had been run up since I think they started 2018 here, right? So the high water, it's not too clear, but it's right in the middle there, you can't miss it, where a lot of property types have been running up. As you can see, some of those trends I was talking about, that dark blue line at the bottom are malls. Well, malls were already struggling. They were already struggling, so that didn't really get changed in 2018. But those prices really went up, and then lo and behold, you have the 5-year anniversary of the pandemic, and that was the big reset, and that really accelerated a lot of changes going on. But here's the good news. Here's what Green Street said, I think it was July 3rd or 5th. It was right around the July 4th holiday last year. They said for the first time there was green shoots in commercial real estate. Not first time, but first time since the decline, right? So they were starting to see changes in price, and they declared that whole cycle of price decline, which is natural in commercial real estate. Jason was talking earlier, commercial real estate just works differently. It's a business, it's an investment transaction. So what happens when there's a change in interest rates and demand? It's just, things have to just shift. Just like all the office buildings that are in trouble. They'll have a future, they just have to reset their price point. So Green Street Advisors noted in July of 2024, so it was last year, that they started to see green shoots. I think it was 2 of the property types started to go upwards, and if you can look to the far right, you'll start to see there's some raise. Now, there's no big boom in the way, and I'm going to cover a couple property types in depth, multifamily, I think is one, and what's my other one today? Oh, wait, office, that's right. But before that, I'll touch a little bit on all these because they do impact this market for sure. So let's talk about industrial. Now, I drove up here from the Ontario airport. You can't miss that warehouse distribution is a big industry along the highway, right? You can't miss that, right? And that's frankly that accelerator effect that got pushed along by the pandemic, which is we're all on our phones doing shopping, right? That's pretty much what it is. Not to mention you have a tremendous benefit with the Port of Long Beach and Los Angeles, right? Where all the goods come in and then they get stored and so forth and shipped around the country. Industrial's been a darling product type of the commercial real estate investment community for, 5 years for all the reasons I just said. And it's doing fine. It's starting to have a little bit of a, kind of a, do we have too much space in some markets? I know we have a representative from CoStar here. The last time I saw CoStar, actually rents declined in Los Angeles and in the Inland Empire. Not by very much, just by here. But let's keep in mind, those rents had gotten super, super high versus warehouse distribution space, so a little decline's okay. Yet in other parts of the country, like Florida and the Southeast, the industrial prices are still rising. There is sort of a short-term issue right now, which is no one knows what's going on with the tariff issue per se, and a lot of people, a lot of companies have imported a ton of stuff to stockpile, right? So those warehouses are super useful. And pardon my voice. I was running a conference this week, so I almost lost my voice. But anyway, so warehouses are still probably okay. If anyone, does anyone own or develop warehouses in this room by any chance? Nobody? I see maybe one hand. But I'll tell you the one place where we are seeing a shortage across the country in the warehouse is small space warehouse. So that's either a large building that can be divided into little segments or just a smaller building altogether. There's lots of those big warehouse 40-foot clear buildings. There's not enough of the smaller distribution space. So if anyone out there is looking for land, looking for an idea for development, that might be an idea. All right, let's move on from industrial. So I'll just skip through a couple of these. Self-storage. Well, people say there's 3 phases of life. Under 25, you want a lot of stuff. Between 25 and 55, you buy a lot of stuff. What happens next? Then you spend the rest of your life getting rid of a lot of stuff, right? So where is the American demographics today? We're in the biggest age cohort, millennials. Where are millennials? They're in that buy a lot of stuff phase, right? And what do you do if, like Jason was saying, you can't move because you got a great deal in the house? What do you do with all that stuff? You put it in self-storage. I'm not saying it's a boom, but it is a pretty solid space. I know there's quite a few developments around here. And one thing I didn't realize, I'm an urban person, as you heard. I live in Chicago. I live in the city. I did have a self-storage for a while. Because when you're in the city, you just don't have enough space. But you know where self-storage is consumed the most? It's actually in secondary and tertiary markets. Because the toys are so much bigger, right? People have jet skis and stuff like that. So self-storage is actually a pretty good, solid product type. As an investment, and by the way, compared to owning apartment buildings or multifamily, self-storage is a lot easier. No one's complaining about toilets and sinks and all that kind of jazz. You just put your stuff, close the door, and you're gone. All right, let's see what else. I'll talk about a couple of things. Strip retail versus, we talked about malls a bit earlier. Strip center retail, let's just say this. If you are a quality, well-located retail center, you're full. I was driving around a little last night. I couldn't tell you which city I was in, sorry. But, I mean, there were some centers that they're nice-looking centers. They're full. I don't see any vacancy. The ones that are a little off the beaten path, aging, yeah, there may be some challenges there. But by and large, retail, and again, let's go back to the pandemic. Who said that retail's done? It's all over. There's not going to be any more retail. Guess what? That's not true. People are both shopping because they want to feel things in stores, or they're going out for experiences. So that's a little bit about the retail market. Let's see. I'll just touch on 2 more. Lodging, just real quick, and we'll go into other in more depth. But lodging. 2 kinds of lodging in the world. Resort lodging, no problem. Everyone loves vacation, right? Also remember the cruise industry. No one's going to take a cruise anymore. Cruises are companies are launching new ships. So lodging is good if you're in a resort. If you're in like an urban center, convention, business, you're relying on that business traffic. Well, everyone's doing Zoom and stuff. That's not so great. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag on lodging. And healthcare, well, let's go back to that 3 phases of life. The American population is generally moving into that later phase of life, and guess what we consume? We consume more healthcare. And that, of course, is medical office, which is now in retail centers. It's also, of course, aging facilities and places like that. All right, so there's a big overview. The things that generated all that, I did that anniversary thing because that shocked the system, right? We had interest rate changes. The commercial market really doesn't like uncertainty because what do you do if you're going to buy? If you're going to sell, you're like, let me just wait a little bit and see if I can get a higher price. And if you're going to buy, you're like, let me just wait a little bit and see if the price comes down, right? So there's always this period of adjustment, but that's what Green Street declared July of last year. That period's over. The markets have adjusted, prices did shift, cap rates have changed, and so forth. So that's gone. And the outlook, I'm not going to predict interest rates. Gosh knows, the Federal Reserve was on yesterday. The Fed, the chairman was on. Who knows what's going to happen? I'm not going to worry about that. Economic uncertainty, to some degree, is how I look at it. There's always economic uncertainty, right? It's just sort of what's the headline tomorrow. And as long as people, but my message here is that the fundamentals of commercial real estate are not like in 2008. And if anyone was alive in the 90s here besides me, the retail apocalypse when we were, what they used to say is we're not overbuilt in retail, we're under demolished. That was the expression back in the early 90s. And maybe we're that way a little bit in office space today, but we're not. The fundamentals are still really good. There's always going to be elections. There's also national elections. Don't forget, local elections probably affect real estate a heck of a lot more, right? Those local, if they allow development or don't allow development or pass laws on this, that, or the other thing. But there are three things, and I did forget one bullet point, but there are three challenges in the commercial market, and also in residential. Construction costs, right? That's one. Labor costs. And the third, I can't believe I missed insurance. Has anyone had an insurance bill go up in the last year? Yeah. Is everyone like with trepidation thinking about next year? I have an owner in Houston that told me, yes, they have insurance for slip and fall. It's an office building. They just dropped their coverage. It doesn't make sense, which is, you have to be pretty well heeled to do that, but that is scary. I'm sure that is happening here as well. All right, let me just dive into other things. And this actually was good kind of echo of what Jason said earlier. I hope you can see that okay. Yeah, you can see that all right. So this was from a company called Trepp Research. I think I'll tell you what the numbers are because I think it's super interesting. This is just looking at multifamily. So earlier today, Jason was telling you a little bit about the lock-in effect and all that kind of jazz. All true, but that does have a flip side to it. If you're a multifamily developer or owner, people are going to have to rent longer, right? So and we know we have a shortage of housing in America, and we talked about affordable housing. Well, guess what? Multifamily, by and large, is affordable housing. Now, there's affordable multifamily. There's also upscale multifamily. Multifamily demand is strong. There are some challenges in the financing of it because a lot of multifamily development's built on 5-year loans, and those loans were 3%, and they're coming due now, and they're now 8% or 7% or whatever it may be. So there's some underlying things there that have to work itself out, but by and large, demand is super strong. Single-family rental. Are there single-family rental communities up here? I don't know, in the high desert? I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know where they are. But, that's very dominant because guess what? If you're not going to be able to afford a house, and you're 40 years old and you have 3 kids, you either want a really nice apartment or you'll rent a house. Whatever. I'll move on in life, but I'll rent. Strong. I know there's some negative views a little bit of it, but single-family rental communities are really just another form of multifamily with more space. They should not be demonized in my opinion, at least. Let's see. The other thing is if you're going to be stuck in an apartment longer than your 20s, you want a nicer place. So there is a demand for sort of higher end with more amenities, a little bit larger, nicer finishes. And also the other group that's renting a lot, and I don't have all the slides here from this report, is people over 65, particularly in the Northeast. So if you did sell your house for some reason, you're just like, I've been through this up and down in the real estate market. I'm just going to rent. So there's some really interesting dynamics. Specific to California and this area, perhaps, let me point out just what's in red here. So the first column, trying to buy, are just people in these different cohorts that are trying to buy a house today, all right? All kind of, for all the reasons we know, kind of in the low percentages. Then there's the portion in those groups that are long-term renters. They're like, I'm just going to stick it out. I'm just here, okay? Numbers have gone up there. But those 2 red numbers, I think, are super interesting. 30 people under 35, 36% of the people who are renting long-term are actually trying to buy. So what that tells us, if we would just build more houses, and yes, if the economics would work out and we could build them in a way that's affordable, there's a lot of demand out there. There is a lot of pent-up demand for housing. And as I understand it, this market is actually probably a pretty right place for fulfilling that demand. And then the other red point, look in the West, and this obviously includes the whole West, not just California, but 34% of the long-term renters in the West are desirous of buying. So there's some really great things, and I know we'll hear from a number of the city leaders. let me just encourage you, adding more housing is key to growth. And you add more housing, it increases demand for shopping centers and all those other things, obviously schools and so forth. Anyway, the other opportunity here, and I just saw it in the prior presentation, development land. Land is a limited commodity that's in demand. All right, number 2, office space. How many people work from home? Well, actually not that bad. Well, you're not, actually, guess what? The number of hands are going down. You know that? Look at this, for the last 3 years now, only 63% are going to work compared, this is from Castle Systems. Castle are the people that do those key cards, right? So they have a pretty good gauge in the market. And in my opinion, we're still working it out. We're still trying to figure out, are we going to be Tuesday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the office, but whatever. Every company's, but the more and more you keep hearing the headlines, more and more companies are saying, you know what, this is great. We'll always be flexible for family reasons, which I think is super important, but we need people in the office because there's something that happens in person that does not happen transactionally over a screen. I certainly believe that. I know it's okay for me at my age of my career, I guess I'll say, but my kids, I want them in the office. I want them networking and seeing where their growth opportunity. Anyway, but what does that mean for the office space market? Hybrid work models are probably here to stay. Probably a demand for more flexible space if you happen to own office space or if you're a government office. Flexible, right? Because people are coming in for different reasons. The older office space, Class B and C, which is commonly called, that's a hard sell. It's a really hard thing right now. People, as long as the market's down and rents have gone down, they're like, hey, I might as well take the really nice office building. And furthermore, if I want people in my office, let's have a nicer place to work, right? Let's spend the money and have a nicer place to work. So spaces are getting reconfigured. Yes, we mentioned, I love that Doge. I didn't know that was a verb, by the way, when I heard it earlier, so that was kind of funny. But there is an impact. We'll see what happens. Although I have to say, there's not a lot of, most government, how many people really want to go work in a government office building? They're generally not that nice, right? So I don't know what's going to happen with those. Who knows what's going to happen on the whole issue? But there's some really interesting things going on in the office space. If you go to downtown LA, it's obviously very different from this market. And then you see there, this is just from this past, it's like a week ago, Tuesday. Those are the in-office work on a Tuesday. So I think that's super interesting. In my opinion, we're not done figuring it all out. And there is still demand for office space. By the way, if you are going to ask me the question at some point or in a break or something, no, office buildings do not easily convert to multifamily. That question is asked all the time. How many of you want to live in a former government office building? Show of hands. Okay. How many want to live in a Class B office building with brown granite in a business park? Not really a good deal. So it's just not that easy. It's really just not. There will be some conversion. Or what will happen, as I said, remember retail, overbuilt or under-demolished. They'll just have to go. I'm from Chicago, as you heard. And by the way, if you've done the river cruise, maybe you had me. I don't know. But you know what's happened there? The Allstate Insurance campus, completely razed. It is now warehouse distribution space. Remember a company called Sears? Yeah, I kind of remember them, yeah. They built a big campus in the suburbs, in the 1990s, razed. So some of it's just gonna have to go. And the good news, if there's demand, there'll be another purpose for that. All right, that's all I'm gonna cover on property types, but I just wanted to share one other thing. I thought this would be interesting for this group. So, switching gears a little bit, retail site selection. I know we talked a lot about, Raising Cane's, Five Below, or the other ones, I don't know that. But I just wanted to share something interesting, because I know this is a pretty fast-growing area. You do have a lot of retail. I can tell the enthusiasm when a Raising Cane's comes in or whatever. But there's more science today to site selection than there has ever been. Let me give you an example. So it used to be if you were a retailer, you'd say, hey, I need to know in a 1, 3, 5 mile radius, what's the age, demographics, income, whatever, right? How good is that? Does anyone know? Is that useful? Is that useful? Kinda. How do you know where your customers are coming from? 135 isn't necessarily it, right? So that wasn't so. And then when I first started in the industry, they would send interns out to sit on street corners, and what did they do? Count cars. Or they had those things in the street, because that was the next one. You had to know how many cars. Is that useful? Kinda. But today, the data is so, I don't have one here, but those dopamine devices we have in our pockets? You know what they are? They're phones. You know what's happening every minute you have that phone on. It is transmitting data about your whereabouts. So and we subscribe to, Coldwell Banker Commercial subscribes some of these tools. What that does, it says, the phone sits here overnight, and therefore I know what zip code that's in, and I know that person's attributes, more or less, right? The phone travels down a path over here, it stops at Starbucks, then that person goes over here to Trader Joe's or whatever it may be and so forth. So this is where retail site selection is going. It's very data-driven decisions, data-driven marketing, and it helps owners of parcels or communities and cities to decide what should they approve for a site. We are doing some, on the East Coast, some consulting for our municipalities to help them decide what should be in a place by looking at the cars that drive by, what's going on, what they're talking about, and so forth. So this graphic here, you see the dot there, I had my team pull Victor Plaza. I've never been to Victor Plaza. Maybe it's nice. I have no idea. But you see in the red, that's where most of the clients from Victor Plaza come from, okay? But in that purplish color, that's more where their customers. But look, I don't know the area so well enough. I'm sorry, but what's way up north there? Does anyone know what the town is? I don't know. You guys probably know. But you also have some yellow up there. That's super interesting, right? So whoever's living up there is shopping at this shopping center, at least a higher percentage. That's why that 135-mile ring is not that useful. It's useful is to really find who's going to your center, who's driving, and then get this. Let's look at the next one. What are they doing before and after? Okay, so in this slide, Victor Plaza, 34% of the people were at home before, okay? And then later, they also went home. So that tells me it's something, they're doing something there that's like what I did on my way here, stopping at Starbucks or something like that. A lot of them seem to like to go to Costco. Is that a big draw? But you see, I'm saying there's a correlation between the plaza and then therefore, guess what? If you're going to develop the parcel across the street, you're going, I better build something that's attractive to a Costco customer. And there's a profile to that, right? So super, super interesting. Or they're going to a grocery store, the thrift store, whatever else is, or their Costco gas lane. That's always a deal, right? So they're doing that. So super interesting stuff today that's well beyond. And then I don't know if this will be a little hard to see, but you take the data goes further and says, okay, of the people that stopped at Victor Plaza, we know they live here, they were going from here to this point, and then you can, because of that, where the phone sits, you can say, okay, what else do they like, right? There's always profiles. We all hate to admit it, but we're all profilable. Profilable, that's a word, right? So those people seem to like McDonald's, Walmart, Starbucks, Chevron, on and on and on. In-N-Out Burgers down there as well. And then post and prior, what companies are they going to? So it's getting I'm just using this as an example because I know this is a pretty fast-growing area, and this is used all over the country. We do site selection for McDonald's and Starbucks in places like Montana. In a big urban area, you can put a Starbucks about every 300 feet and you have no problem. But, you have to be a little bit more strategic in a market where people are driving and so forth. So I will leave you with that. There's some interesting things to think about. I really appreciate you having me back again. Happy anniversary, everybody. It's been great to be here. Take care.